Welcome to the first lecture of BIB201, Bible Doctrines 1. Today we are going to be discussing the various definitions of theology and the divisions of theology. So let's get started. First, let's talk about the definition of theology. Basically, what is theology? The biblical definitions come from, number one, the word theology. It is a combination of two Greek words, theos, meaning God, and logos, meaning communication, discourse, or doctrine. Now, very basically, most people define the word logos as just meaning the word, but in the Greek it is so much more deep than just word. It actually literally means a collection of ideas and thoughts put together. So theology is a collection of thoughts and ideas about God. Therefore, number two, theology is thinking and speaking about God. It is taking all the data about God, putting it together, thinking it through, and then expressing it in words so others can understand. Learning about God is never enough. God has made His truth to be shared to other people, and the fullest experience of theology is to share what we have learned with other people. Not only are we going to look at the biblical definition, now let's look at letter B. Theological definitions. Number one, a theologian named Floyd Berrickman said, "Theology is a discourse or teaching about God and the things of God." Not only did he contribute a great definition to theology, but Charles Ryrie also said, "Theology is the discovery, systematizing, and presentation of the truths about God." So basically everything that we discussed already from the word logos is implemented in both Berrickman and Ryrie's definition. So now that we've talked about what theology is, the definitions, let's talk about number two, divisions of theology. We're going to talk about four primary divisions or branches of theology. The first is letter A, historical theology. Now, historical theology is a branch of theology that deals with what was said in the past by the church as a whole or by church leaders individually. So basically, what did they teach about God in different time periods of the church, and what did different individuals teach about God, like Martin Luther? That would be Lutheran theology. Or John Calvin, that'd be Calvinistic theology, and it goes on and on. Different individuals and what they said. Now, you might say that this type of study is a waste of time, but we have to remember that so many issues that the early church and churches throughout the ages have struggled with face us even today. And some of the largest cults that stumble on the teachings about Jesus, they end up twisting things, and they have start rehashing information and bad theology that we've already discussed throughout history and already refuted. So it's good to know about historical theology because it helps us have a better understanding of what people have believed in the past and how some of those heresies were put down. Number two, this branch of theology focuses upon the history of the church, covering the creeds, development of doctrine, missions, and all areas of historical importance to the church. Now that word creeds there, don't get fall on that, and we're not talking about the odd gentleman who is in the office. That creeds there is the belief systems, like what did each individual and who was influential in theology throughout history, and what did the church during different time periods, what did they believe, what did they hold to as the foundation to the Christian faith. So that's historical theology. Now let's move on to letter B. Biblical theology. Now, biblical theology is also commonly called exegetical theology, and this is actually one of my favorite types of theology to study. Number one, this branch of theology seeks to understand God's message in a particular book or books of the Bible. So to give you an example, if you were going to study Matthean theology, what you would do is you would study the theology in the book of Matthew. Petrine theology, you would study what Peter had to say in 1st and 2nd Peter about various doctrines. Lucan theology is Luke. How about this one? Jacobean theology. Now, I know what you're thinking. Wait, what book is written by Jacob? Well, interestingly, the New Testament Greek name James is the Old Testament Hebrew word Jacob. So Jacobean theology is actually studying the book of James. So it goes on and on. Johannine theologies, the Gospels, Gospel of John, 1st, 2nd, 3rd John, Revelation. But these are branches when you decide to just delve into one particular book or books written by an author. Number two, these aspects include things such as studying the author, archaeology, time, occasion, textual criticism, and examining the text of the scriptures. So let's break that down. It says first we're going to study the author, so who wrote it, and then why do we believe that individual wrote it? How can you defend that? And then the archaeology is what was going on during that time period throughout the world? Are there places mentioned that we've done excavations on and found interesting artifacts? Then time and occasion. What date was this writing given? And what about the occasion? Why was it written? Why did this writer decide, or why did God decide to inspire this individual to write that document? Now, textual criticism basically is just looking at the underlying text to each passage and determining what was in the original. Because you have to remember, we do not have the original documents. So in order to try to determine what the originals were, you look at all the texts that have been copied since then to be able to compare them, and you go with what is best. And then the examination of the text of Scripture itself. So what does the passages actually say? So that is biblical theology. Let's look now at letter C. Systematic theology. Number one, this branch of theology seeks to discover truths about God and put these truths into an organized manner so they can be easily and readily grasped. That's why the word systematic is associated with this type of theology, because it tries to develop a system in which you can easily understand different beliefs. Now, biblical theology is great, but is there any one book of the Bible that contains all that we need to know about theology? No, of course not. So if you wanted to study, let's say, Christology, the study of doctrines of Christ, no one book would tell you everything. So you would go to all the different books of the Bible that talk about Jesus, organize them together, and you would systematically present what the Bible teaches about Jesus. But not only that, number two, this branch of theology takes information that pertains to God and arranges it in a logical order so that they can be studied and learned. This is the key right here. This is why systematic theology is so popular, is because it makes it easier to be able to study the doctrines and to learn them. Now, the approach that we're going to take in this class is all four of them are going to be used, but it's more systematic. Instead of us going through book by book, we're going to be breaking it down into doctrine by doctrine. So that is letter C, systematic theology. And let's look at the last one, letter D. Practical theology. Now, practical theology seeks to apply God's truths in a useful manner. Now, this one right here is vitally important, because if you're studying theology and you're not making practical applications, then there's no point in what you're doing. The purpose of studying theology and being a theologian is not just to know a bunch of information about the Bible. Knowledge doesn't help you. It's applying the knowledge that you have which makes you bear fruit. Our job and our goal in this class is going to be to learn a lot about God and the things of God, but then also try to apply them to our lives so that we can be more like Jesus and point others to Him. So that's number one. Leads us perfectly to number two. This branch of theology's primary aim is to show how these truths are to be applied to our everyday areas of our lives. Now, just like this picture shows, the Bible speaks into our heart as different strings to be able to piece together a beautiful picture of what we should look like. And again, the original artifact that we're supposed to be comparing ourselves to is Jesus. And throughout this course, my goal is to be able to point all of us to the image of Christ so we can be more like Him. Well, that concludes Lecture 1 for BIB 201. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact me. I'm here for you, and I'll help you in any way that I can.